Hello, my name is Jenée Stanfield, and this is the discussion for uh, The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester, and I'm just waiting for Eric to join me. Momentarily.
Hi.
Oh,
I'll be right with you.
okay.
Hello.
Hi. Oh,
Hi,
sorry,
how's it going?
you're on the phone.
Sorry, issues with the family. Okay.
Okay.
Issue is solved.
Yes!
Huzzah! Oh. So, what did you think of the book?
Okay, first I want to ask you,
Okay.
before I talk about what I thought about the book, I want to ask you, why did you recommend the book to me? You actually gave or maybe we should introduce ourselves first.
All right.
Okay. You want to start?
All right. Hello, I'm Eric Noble. I'm a collaborator for Ukko. Is that it? Ukko Lit?
Oh, yeah, Ukko.
Yep. I plan to.
I'm drinking a beer while we're doing this.
I got a trusty Diet Coke from Jack in the Box.
Mm.
Corporate sponsor.
Oh no, because Google said don't show anything you don't own the copyrights to.
Yeah.
Probably
Too late.
Dude.
I will edit it out in post.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yes, I'm Eric Noble. I'm a contributor here to Ukko Lit. I plan to add illustrations to the various articles that my friend here writes, and plan to contribute various articles myself of books that I have read.
Awesome. And other stuff too, right?
And other stuff. Whatever pops into my brain.
whatever cool things just fly out of your head. Okay.
Yep.
So I am Jenée Stanfield, and I write Ukko blog, and along with my good friend Eric Noble, I run ukkolit.com, and this is the first in a video series that I'm planning to do on science fiction literature, where I'm going to have people recommend me books. I'm going to read them, then I'm going to discuss those books with said people who recommended them to me. So awesome.
Excellent.
Okay. So, Eric, you recommended me this book, The Demolished Man, by Alfred Bester, and you actually gave me this book. Do you have the same copy as me?
No, mine is from the SF Masterworks series.
Ah, okay.
Which is an imprint of the Orion Publishing Group.
Oh, nice.
I read it straight from the back.
Fancy reading the back.
Yep. Why I recommended the book is because I had already started reading it, and it seemed like a fascinating topic to me.
Yeah.
Plus, it is a favorite novel of one of my favorite authors, Harlan Ellison.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that he wrote, he mentioned this novel by name. Just like, well, it sounded interesting enough. And so I decided to check it out. And then after the first few chapters, I was really intrigued by it, and I just wanted to share it with you because I thought, well, this might be something you would like.
Okay. And you actually gave it to me for Christmas, too.
Yes.
Which was nice, because then I didn't have to go out and buy it myself.
Yes. It was nice. I saw it
myself, though.
Yeah. I saw it down at Finally Found Books. It's just like, hey, this is a good price.
That is a really awesome local bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
I love local bookstores, especially new and used bookstores.
Oh, yeah.
Best, because you can find so many treasures there, and so that's really great. So you want to maybe we'll start talking a little bit about the novel. You want me to ask you a question first, or is there anything you wanted to talk about first?
No, you can go right ahead. I'm just
Okay.
Get the ball rolling.
So, something in the novel that I found really interesting was there are quite a few characters in it who have a difficult time with reality. The book is a lot about reality and how how certain characters see things and how that differs from reality. Obviously, the first one would be why can't I think of his name? He's the main character.
Ben Reich.
What?
Are you talking about Ben Reich?
Yes, Ben Reich. Yeah, he's one of the first characters who has a difficult time facing reality. There's also Barbara DeCourtney as well, and then Lincoln Powell. I almost called him William Powell because of the actor. But Lincoln Powell, he's another character who I wouldn't necessarily. He's not at the same level of not being able to accept reality as those other two characters, but he does have this almost like split personality, dishonest Abe.
Right.
that lies all the time. So I think that's really interesting, and I think there's got to be something to that. What do you think about that? That there's so many characters that completely refuse reality,
Where they just can't handle the reality that is handed to them. I mean, there's even on a smaller level. I mean, Lincoln Powell just even refusing the act of marriage.
Yeah.
He has to marry another Esper by a certain time.
Yeah.
And he just can't bring himself to do it.
By the time he turns 40 or something like that?
I believe so, yeah. I think it's 40. Yeah,
maybe we should explain what an Esper is.
Esper is a telepath. Someone who can read your mind.
Yeah.
There are 3 levels of telepaths. There's grade 3, which is the lowest. Means it can read your conscious thoughts. And then there's, I believe, grade 2 is the unconscious, kind of the like if we're gonna put this like Freudian terms, the grade 3 can access the superego, which is the higher part of the brain, your higher consciousness. Grade 2 would be the ego, kind of a lower but still higher than what grade 1 is. Grade 1 can go all the way down to your core.
Yeah, until your id.
Yeah, and to the id.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also a guild, which is called the Guild of Espers, which kind of rules their all of the Espers. It trains them. It tells them you have to marry other Espers. For the really rich Espers, they have to give a ton of taxes to them.
Mm-hmm. They have their own right-wing group, the League of Esper Patriots, which I'm guessing is the one who insisted on the rule that Esper can only marry other Espers. No. That sounds like something.
I think the entire guild felt like that because it sounded a lot like they were interested in eugenics, and so they want more Espers, and I think they don't want to pollute the gene pool with normals. That's what it seemed like to me. Normal.
Yeah, but I think it could but I'm thinking that element of Esper life is probably that's where you can find the root, is in the group of Esper Patriots.
It's possible. I think they use an analogy in the book where they talk about people who are deaf mutes and sign language, and how if part of that if someone from that group is ostracized from the group, then it's like they can't talk to anybody because only people within that group can talk to each other. Although the analogy became really weird because at the end of it, they was it Pal who gave that analogy, I think.
No, I think it might have been.
Jaspers.
No, I think it might have been like Gus Tate who first brought up that analogy. The Esper that worked with Reich.
Oh, okay. So Gus Tate, who is a first Esper, and he's a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Doesn't really matter the distinction.
Not really.
But the weird part at the end of that metaphor is then somebody said so that means you're kind of the deaf mute in this analogy, but they said no, normal people are. So it was an analogy that kind of didn't work at the end, because they were talking about people who could talk in their own language and people being ostracized, but then they were basically, by which he was talking about the Espers, or the Peepers as they're called, because that's the group where if you don't follow the guild rules, you get ostracized from the group, and then no one talks to you telepathically anymore. But then at the end, Tate says, no, it's you normal people who are the deaf mutes.
Yeah.
So that was a weird bit of writing. I get what they were saying, meaning normal people can't telepathically communicate, but it kind of ruins the metaphor that he was setting up.
Yeah, that's probably something that could have been made a little more clear.
Yeah. But I get it, but it was just weird. Maybe let's get back to what we were talking about originally, was the characters who are unable to face reality. So, you mentioned, you were talking about Lincoln Powell and how even just the fact that he's not able to face the reality that he has to marry an Esper, he's pretty uninterested in marriage at all, whether it's an Esper or not Esper in the beginning of this novel. And I think, what do you think the significance is of his other kind of personality, Dishonest Abe, where he lies all the time?
Well, the dishonest where he's just lies all the time. I think it's just another way of him dealing with all of the. It could be just an outlet for all of the pressures of being an Esper, because you're gaining so much.
I think so.
Information.
He's very prestigious within the guild too. They kind of wanted him to become the new president, didn't they?
Yes, I believe so. They wanted. Yeah, he was a very high-ranking person.
Yes, I love him.
Yep. And he's. Yeah, I think Dishonest Abe is just another way of him just trying to release some of that. I don't know if it'd be frustration or just angst, or just something to release, kind of purge those negative emotions, because you're trying to. You're putting up. He's a grade 1 Esper, and he's taking in so much.
Yeah, he is taking in a lot. I think also he talks about near the end of the novel, when he's talking to Barbara de Courtenay, who witnessed her father being murdered by one of the other characters at the beginning of the novel, and so she goes into a catatonic state, and she basically has to relive her life from childhood to adulthood, slowly developing within a matter of weeks, which I thought was a really interesting concept.
That is.
But she still has that id deep down of an adult, and so then there's that telepathic relationship that Barbara de Courtenay and Lincoln Powell have with each other, um, uh, where it's still her grown-up self deep down. And so there's these two sides to them both. There's the insane, if you want to say, Barbara DeCourtney, who's acting like a child on the outside, and then there's the grown-up Barbara DeCourtney way down, and Lincoln Powell has a relationship with both of them, and he explains to her, that they both have two sides of them.
Right. Yeah, it does make more sense, and it is a fascinating concept of how, on the one hand, deep down, you still have your original core self.
Yeah.
But then on the higher levels of consciousness, you have to almost essentially regrow into your old self, or almost create a new self.
And I think that was setting us up for the end of the novel, in which we finally find out what demolition is, the punishment demolition, which seems to be like the worst punishment that's doled out in this society, is demolition. In which Ben Riker is demolished, and all of kind of his memories and all of him, his self is basically erased from his mind, and so he has to kind of start from the beginning again.
Yeah.
Basically, he just has consciousness, but because of his crimes, everything else is erased, so they're kind of rebuilding him.
Yeah, I mean, there's demolition, and then comes reconstruction.
Yeah, I think that speaks to, especially with Powell's comments at the end, where he's talking about, well, back in the day, they used to have corporal punishment, and they used to have the death penalty, and so they just threw these people away. But now we can fix them and rehabilitate them and rebuild them. So I think that's obviously partly a commentary on how we punish criminals today.
Right.
And I think also how we kind of throw away people.
We do, and I don't know if the treatment put forth in the book would be any better. I mean,
yeah,
because in a way you're still killing someone. It's just,
yes, literally the treatment is kind of horrific, but I think metaphorically the idea of, if someone has something kind of wrong or diseased in their brain, like that, and that's how I would classify Ben Riker. If we can rehabilitate them and kind of build them back up, they can have something to contribute to society.
I mean, that is something that is talked about whenever Powell talks about Ben Reich throughout the book. He talks about parts that he actually admires about him.
Well, and he mentions when he's talking to him at one point that that Ben has two sides to him. He has a saint side, and I can't remember how he phrases it. I don't think he says sinner. Maybe he says a monster or a demon. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I think monster was probably the more.
Yeah. But basically, he has a good side to him and an evil side to him, and Powell says he really loves Riker's saint side, and he really hates his evil side. And I think that's seen with the fear that Ben Riker has of the man with no face, who at the end of the novel is revealed to be himself, and it's revealed to be the part of himself that he can't admit consciously, which is that he is Craig de Courtney's son, and by killing de Courtney, he killed his own father.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that plays into the part of his saintly side, and his monstrous side is also something, was a theme that was brought up, I think, in a conversation I think earlier in the book, where they talk about the kind of the fight between your conscious and unconscious selves.
Yeah.
Leading to one's own destruction. I think they were talking about a person that was suffering from that.
I believe that was de Courtney himself.
Yes.
He felt all of this guilt, and so he kind of just wanted to die. And we find out at the end of the book the reason he feels all this guilt and this sense of that he's abandoned his child is because Ben Riker is his son, and he did not raise Ben Riker. He did raise Barbara de Courtney, and he was apparently a good father to her because she really loved him a lot, which we found out from some of the creepier elements of Lincoln Powell going into Barbara de Courtney's mind.
Yeah, there were, one could almost say, Oedipal elements to the story.
Yeah, I think maybe you could say it's Oedipal from Riker's sense, although we don't know until the end that it is. But I think that the term for Barbara is, I think it's the Electra complex.
Okay.
Where women are in love with their father. So
Okay.
it's very much a book about Freudian psychology in many ways.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if that was probably something that Alfred Bester maybe read up on, and then maybe
I'm sure, because there's constant references to it. They talk about the id and the superego. I mean, all the time they're talking about psychological stuff. Even Lincoln Powell, who's supposed to be a police officer, he's constantly talking about psychological concepts, Freudian psychological concepts. So I think maybe that can bring us into something that I definitely wanted to discuss, because I found it the romantic relationship between Barbara de Courtney and Lincoln Powell, I found was maybe one of the weaker parts of the novel. To be honest, I thought it was fucking creepy.
It is rather creepy and almost kind of indicative of the time it was written in.
Yes.
It's because the way Lincoln talks to Barbara.
Yes, and the reason he loves Barbara so much, I think, is because of this paternal relationship that he has with her, where she is on the outside, on the outside she acts as a child. I mean, physically she's an adult, but her conscious mind and her actions are that of a child. And granted, he does get to know her kind of deep down super deep subconscious self, which is still an adult, but it's a very weird situation. And then Barbara definitely sees Lincoln Powell as a father figure, and it's just creepy. I think also the end, I was not a fan of the end where oh, magically, she's an Esper too. I, I got the foreshadowing. I knew it was coming, but I felt like I felt like it was a really tacked on happy ending.
Yeah, it was. And
Where we completely ignore the fact that the guild is almost dictatorial of the lives of the Espers in many ways, including telling them who they can and can't marry. And that's definitely a problem. I mean, that's something that Lincoln Powell has a problem with. That's something that a lot of the Espers have a problem with. There's a young doctor who brings his fiance to Lincoln Powell's party, and he treats the fiance like crap. And basically, the only reason they're getting married is because she's an Esper, and he has to marry an Esper. But it's really terrible, and I feel like that was something that was completely ignored. They set it up in that the guild does some pretty shitty things and controls people's lives in some pretty shitty ways. But in the end, it's kind of just glossed over because, oh, happy ending for Powell. Barbara really is a latent Esper.
yeah, that was.
It made me mad. I liked the novel in so many ways, but the ending, which I felt was overly explanatory within the dialogue, one.
Right.
And two, the tacked on happy ending of she's magically an Esper too. Didn't care for that. What about you? How did you feel about that romance and the ending and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I actually didn't mind the explanatory parts about.
I mean, some of it was necessary, obviously.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit of a head trip for me, and just like, and then it was suddenly, oh, it's all made clear.
Yeah.
But I will agree with you, that whole part of, oh, I'm an Esper now. It's like,
magic. What it reminded me of is the ending of a book, which is one of my favorite sci-fi novels, and they ended it much better, and that's Dune, where Paul is not able to marry the woman that he loves because he has to marry the Emperor's daughter, right? For political reasons instead. And so he has to just continue on with the love of his life. I can't remember her name right now.
right.
Do you remember? I think she was the mother of some of his children too.
I only got like a few chapters into Dune, and while I liked what I read.
Oh my gosh, you're fired now. You have to read Dune.
I will. It'll probably be one of the articles I write.
Okay. Because Dune is such an amazing book, but that's okay if you don't know it. I'm looking up right now.
That's going to be it's going to be the subject of a future project that I have in mind.
Okay.
I'll tell you about it off air.
All right. I think her name's like Channy or something. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm totally telling you the ending of the novel now. But it's still worth reading, even if I'm telling you some of the ending.
Well, right. Sometimes it's all about the journey.
Yes. No. It's a really amazing novel. Have you watched any of the miniseries?
No, I have not.
Okay. They have a couple different miniseries, an earlier one and a later one, and I think both of them are pretty decent. I think the earlier one came out in the 70s or 80s, and everybody loves that one.
There was the film version of Dune that was made in the early 80s.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I actually own a copy of it.
And you haven't watched it yet?
No. I want to read the book first. And
it is a fantastic book. It's definitely one of my favorite science fiction books. It's so great. Okay, so anyway, back to my point. After you know, advertising Dune is that at the end of that novel, Paul is not able to marry Jenée because of political reasons. And I believe at that point she's already the mother of some of his children, and so she just kind of has to be his concubine because he has to marry the daughter of the emperor. Um, and I don't know, I just felt like that was. It really depends on the novel, of course, for how you have to end it. But I felt like in that case it was such a more interesting ending than the Demolition Man, which I felt was kind of just, oh, let's have a happy ending.
Yeah, it definitely is one of the weaknesses of the book, and
Took all of the teeth out. There was neither I think it was in some ways set up to be a tragedy in the end, and so there was neither a sense where William Powell, not William Powell, sorry.
Lincoln Powell.
I really love William Powell, though.
Well, yes, he was the Thin Man.
I love the Thin Man series. Sorry, Lincoln Powell. Um, Lincoln Powell. Neither. He neither sacrificed anything. He neither sacrificed for the guild, like sacrificing his romantic relationship or whatever for the guild, making it kind of a tragedy by marrying an Esper instead and just either leaving Barbara de Courtenay behind or having her be kind of his lover.
Right.
Nor did he sacrifice for Barbara de Courtenay by having to, leave his community and probably be ostracized. And I think that would have been a more interesting ending. And I think also since to me, the guild seemed semi-monstrous. As I said, I felt like it was dictatorial. And so I felt like the novel was really calling for something to happen. Either a big important member like William Powell had to go against it, or we had to experience some kind of tragedy because he had to sacrifice something very important to him so that he could remain in it. So it just felt like a really lost opportunity.
Right. Well, I think the ending I probably would have gone with is the fact that he would fear, because of the fact that he was so iffy about marriage, he would keep Barbara de Courtenay as a lover or a concubine, however you want to phrase it. It's kind of what she would be. She'd be the mistress.
Yeah, the mistress.
And he would kind of, for fear of being ostracized and ending up like Jerry Church,
yeah,
I would say, in my opinion, have him marry Noyes.
Yeah.
Because
I'm bad for Mary. I'm like, why don't you love her, Lincoln? She's a much more interesting character to me than Barbara de Courtenay.
Yeah, and
I was a man, I would love the shit out of Mary Noyes.
And you have less Freudian, connections there, and it seems more of a normal, healthy relationship, but
that's the problem. Lincoln Powell is too fucked up.
Probably.
And so he needs a really screwed up relationship like that. And
you could almost say that almost all of the Espers are kind of fucked up in some way.
They are, yeah. I think the thing is, maybe it just goes back to the time period in which the novel was written, because it came out in 1951. And I mean the view of women at that time, and I think also the view of relationships and the point of marriage, because I think yeah, 1951 is when it came out. I think women in many ways were still almost thought of as almost children. They needed to be taken care of by men, and I think that's definitely reflected in the novel.
Right.
There's definitely a huge paternal aspect to their relationship.
Oh yes, that can't be denied.
Mm-hmm.
That and the fact that marriage is almost treated like an obligation.
Yeah, marriage is an obligation, and we see in the novel that none of the men really want to get married, and all of the women, their biggest obsession is getting married.
Yeah.
All the women, but several of the women who aren't, too old for the author to even care about, like Shoka Fruit, or
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a stereotype that pervades our culture today.
Yeah, either too old or too fucked up,
Yeah.
Because Barbara didn't seem to care too much about marriage, at least not until she actually came back to her adult self.
But she did definitely have an obsession with being in love with Lincoln very quickly. At least with her adult self, and then very quickly with her child's kind of self. She talked about, oh, when I grow up, I'm gonna marry Daddy.
Okay.
Creepy.
It was very creepy. But yeah, that's one of the kind of the unfortunate things about it, of some of the older novels, that they do show their age in some ways.
They do, and I think that's kind of important, though, because to acknowledge that, and I don't think that's something that should be folderized out of novels.
No.
Because I think we need to see that. We need to see the honest truth that that's how society kind of works back then. That's how people saw women or minorities, or any other group. I don't think we should just whitewash over things. So,
No.
That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying,
It's best to take the best parts of the novel and stand it up and say, this is good.
This is good. I think, we also have to look at the other parts of the novel too, and recognize that, and see, does this still reflect where we are? Is this just the past? Is it still present in our culture?
Well, it talks about how everything that was has been and will be again. It's kind of talking about the circular nature of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's...
What did you think about we could almost call it a dream sequence near the end of the novel? Where that was a real mindfuck, wasn't it?
That was a mindfuck at the end. That's why I was glad for the explanatory dialogue at the end.
That did help. Where Lincoln Powell goes.
You want William Powell to play Lincoln Powell in the film adaptation, don't you?
I do, but I feel William Powell is definitely dead. So.
Well, you have some. Well, you're building one in your head, and you're just trying to find the perfect actor for the part. And you just want William Powell for that part, don't you?
I want William Powell for everything. Maybe we can use holograms.
Oh, let's get to work on that.
Let's start building our holodeck right now.
Yes.
Program in some things. I don't feel that I'm that good of an engineer though, so.
Neither am I.
So we'll have to find some scientists to help us with this one.
Got it. But yeah, the dream sequence. Holy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? Like set it up.
Okay.
Because I'm incapable of saying Lincoln Powell.
All right. Lincoln Powell is trying to catch Ben Reich for the murder of Craig DeCourtney. And to catch him, he needs all the power of all the Espers to confront
in the
Ben Reich.
Universe.
Yeah, like collecting all the power of every Esper, and he attacks Ben Reich's conscious mind, and causing him to hallucinate in some way. Almost the very.
Yeah, he sets up this fantasy for him, right? That he's the only thing in the universe that is real, and then everything starts to fall away. It starts with the stars are gone.
Yep.
And then claim there's
the moon.
More stars.
Yeah. Then the moon is gone, and
moon.
parts of the city are going away. The sun.
Yeah. And then
it drives Ben Reich crazy.
Yeah, and then just everything falls away, except for him.
Yeah.
And when it's just him, then he's allowed to finally accept who the No-Face Man is.
Mm-hmm. And really, he was by that point halfway to demolition.
Yeah.
When he could finally face what the man with no face was, he was pretty much already gone.
Yeah.
It was just everything. It was all over, but the crying.
But I think that was right before he got sent for demolition, right?
Right. But he was pretty much demolished by that point anyway. It's just
yes. It was
pretty much just sweeping away all the old remnants of him.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think this isn't 100% spelt out, but pretty much it is that Ben Riker has this huge god complex, and so this fantasy, which it was almost like Inception, reminded me of Inception, that
because I think way cooler.
Yeah, it's way cooler. That Cal plants in his mind is basically that the entire universe was created for him and his father, DeCourtney, to... It was kind of a puzzle for them to figure out and come together, and they are kind of the only things that are real. And by killing DeCourtney and doing all these other horrible things, he's destroyed everything. And he's the only thing real, and he's the only thing left, in his mind at least.
Yeah. A question I have to bring up is, why did Powell, when he was talking to the guild about, kind of joining forces together to invade Ben Reich's mind, why did he feel that was so important? He was talking as if it was spelling some kind of impending doom, as if the entire universe was going to collapse.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why when we first see that kind of hallucination / dream sequence, we kind of think it's real because that's the way it's set up in the guild meeting. That he is like, Ben Riker is almost like this super being, and if he isn't stopped, that it will mean the destruction of the entire universe. But
yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, the way I thought of it was when I was reading it, I thought it was because he was almost like some kind of super Esper, kind of a latent super Esper that was able to fuck with everyone else.
Because they made it sound like he could literally manipulate reality.
Yes.
Own will, like he's Q or something from Star Trek, or I don't know, the Star Child or something from 2000.
Yeah, like that. You know.
And I think that deliberately we were made to think that, especially for this hallucination thing, so we think that it is too late, that that's happened, everything in the universe is destroyed. But I think we find out at the end from Powell that the reason he's so dangerous or whatever is because he in himself is very powerful. He has ties to the right wing group in the guild. He has a lot of money. He has a lot of power. He has the means to bring people to his will through propaganda or money or whatever it is.
So in a way, he is able to manipulate reality.
Yes, because because of his power and his money, he can change society.
The perception.
And people's perception to whatever way he sees fit. So I almost maybe it's like he's almost like Hitler or something, a type of Hitler in which he can do that amount of damage and change people's minds and control them in that kind of way. So he's not God, he's just an incredibly frightening figure. Because he was already beginning to turn people against Espers. And
he was able to get other Espers to turn against the guild and the group.
And other stuff. Although again, I say I don't like the guild.
No, but he was having people twisting people against each other.
He was, yeah. So with his money and his power and his charm, as Powell describes it, because he describes him as being very charming, Ben Riker can manipulate people, he can manipulate situations, even if he can't manipulate physical,
reality.
The fabric of space-time and all of reality and erase the stars and everything else. He can make people big. He can bend them to his will, basically.
And sort of Lincoln Powell takes that idea and kind of dramatically, I don't want to say exaggerates, but twists it in such a way to make it sound like he is this.
It almost, it becomes like a metaphor.
Yes.
So when he creates the hallucination in Ben Riker's mind, he is playing out kind of the metaphor that he set up that Ben Riker can basically change all of reality. And by that, he can change all of society, basically. Not literally all of reality.
But, yeah. Okay, the way you keep saying, I have to say that the way you keep saying Ben Riker, I'm now imagining Jonathan Frakes playing the character. Like a young Jonathan Frakes from early TNG.
That is so funny because every time I said it or you said it, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes,
he's like time. All like think of was TNG the entire time.
But yeah, now I want to see a young Jonathan Frakes. I want to see a young Jonathan Frakes play Ben Reich in the film adaptation. We can, time travel and bring him to the future. And we can get William Powell to play Lincoln Powell. Let's do this!
Awesome. Well, as I said, we'll need a holodeck. So,
definitely.
Maybe Jonathan Frakes can help us with that.
We gotta get to work on that. But, which you were talking about this, reading this book, I've been watching a series of video reviews on the show Babylon 5.
Yeah.
And on the show, they have what is called the Psi Corps, which is kind of a police group of telepaths.
Yeah.
And one of the
people, a lot of the book, I bet.
Yeah, definitely inspired by the book, because since Harlan Ellison worked on that show, he was a creative consultant.
That makes sense, and he loves the book.
He does. And in fact, one of the characters' names, one of the telepaths' names, his name is Alfred Bester.
Brilliant! I love it!
And guess who plays him?
Who?
Give you 3. Can you do it in 3? You won't see it coming. Okay, I'll give you a clue.
Okay.
Okay, say nuclear vessels. No.
Well, Walter Koenig.
Walter Koenig.
I'm near the bottom of my beer, so I'm slurring my words a little bit right now.
Yeah. But yes, Walter Koenig.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
That just makes me reading this book just makes me want to see that show even more.
Definitely.
And Walter Koenig playing a telepath named Alfred Bester? Brilliant. Also, in another episode of that same show, they talk about there is a form of punishment in the Babylon 5 universe called the death of personality, where they do what they do in the Demolished Man to people, to convicted criminals.
You know what? Now that I'm thinking about that you mentioned that, and I'm thinking about the book, have you ever seen Joss Whedon's series Dollhouse?
No, I have not.
Because it is basically about a group of people who their personalities are completely wiped out, and then they're programmed to be different people, and it's almost like I guess you could say an indentured servitude. I'm not maybe not exactly that, but they sign a contract and they basically lose, I think, 3 or 5 years of their lives, and then they wake up not knowing what happened to them, but they have money or whatever. It's such a good series. It's fantastic. So I definitely recommend. I believe they have it on Netflix. So
okay, I'll check it out.
On Netflix.
I would just like to say, for those of you watching right now, we are discussing the influence of the Demolished Man on popular culture.
Yes.
On science fiction that has come afterwards.
Yeah.
This is all relevant, folks.
It's all relevant, in a way.
But yes. So, I thought this was a pretty good book. A few weaknesses aside, the ending.
I think it was an amazing book.
Yes.
No book is perfect. I think there's a reason it won the first Hugo Award. It's very brilliant in so many ways. One of its brilliance is the text formatting and text weaving that he has in there when they're showing telepathic conversations.
Oh my goodness, that was
that up. I loved that so much.
Oh my, yes, that was actually one of the things that really drew me into the book. It's just like, wow, how he's actually laying out telepathic conversations. It's like, holy cow!
So interesting. He uses that in, I think, the coolest way. That's something I really love. Everything's from third person, but I would say third person limited most of the time, and so he changes the perspective often between being what we call in the fiction world on Ben Riker's shoulder to being on Lincoln Powell's shoulder, and I think that's done really well. And I mean, so many great things about this novel.
It was, and I'm trying to think here, that isn't playing with the layout and the formatting of the page itself. Isn't that something that postmodern writers do, or is that modernist? Because
Yeah, probably postmodern fiction writers, I would say, kind of do that. And at this point, let's see, it's the 50s.
yeah,
So yeah, that would be the postmodern period.
okay.
It's something that that's been done in poetry for, I mean, centuries. I think I was talking to someone the other day who has actually read The Demolished Man, and we were talking about it, and I mentioned the poet George Herbert from, I'm trying to remember, I want to say he's from either the 17th or 18th century. Let me look that up really fast. But George Herbert does that, and I mean, of course, E. Cummings is a more recent example of someone who does that kind of playing with text in poetry. And you know, I love that, because I think it's great to have a visual aspect to writing, because a lot of people sometimes feel like that's kind of lacking when they read. I think it just depends on who you read, though.
Mm-hmm. What it reminds me of is the author that I think of is Lewis Carroll, because you have the one instance in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where talking about the rat's tale, where the rat is telling her story, and what Alice is seeing is reflected on the page, and you just see the words forming the tale. It's like that's what it reminded me of.
It's very, very cool.
It adds a bit of visual dynamism to the page.
Yeah.
And
I just looked up George Herbert, 17th century poet, and he's fantastic. I remember reading him back in good old undergrad school as an English major. So yeah, I think just the visual aspect of the text formatting. I mean, obviously, the way some writers do it, it can be gimmicky, but I think when it's done well, it adds a really dynamic element, and I just felt Alfred Bester did it really well.
yeah, he did. But it also had a proper context. That's what also is needed. We're doing something like that.
Yes, I think it was something. I think it definitely added. It didn't detract. I mean, there were parts where maybe things became a little difficult to read what order you're supposed to read it in, but at the same time, that was intentional. That was intentionally done. And he even mentions, one of the telepaths say, look at this thought pattern we've weaved. It's so confusing. So.
Okay, folks, and they talk about certain patterns that are built now, basket weaving and such.
I thought that was so cool, and it made me want to be a telepath, and that's the one instance in which I kind of liked the guild, because I'm like, they teach you to think in such interesting ways.
they teach you how to use your powers properly and how to focus them, and
yeah, and all
but that's pretty much the only good part of the guild that you can really say is that they teach people. And
they
other parts, it's
and even the high taxes and everything is meant to benefit espers, you know, through their education and everything else. So in some ways that's understandable, but they do control espers' lives a lot.
Yeah, and it just gets awkward.
I think also at the end of the book, Powell mentions not wanting to throw away people who kind of think outside of the box, who kind of think outside of society, who have the courage to do that. When he's talking about Ben Riker, why they wouldn't just kill him. And he mentions, you know, well, maybe back then when they were doing corporal punishment and the death penalty and all that, they only wanted people who were sheep.
Yeah, he does.
And so I think that was an interesting thing he brought up.
But with the way they actually handle the situation in that book now, it's just sort of like, aren't you just creating a different type of sheep?
Yes, that's true.
One who will be good and loyal to the guild?
The guild, because Lincoln Powell doesn't go against the guild.
No. It almost seems like now the guild is almost, at the end, the guild is just kind of a peripheral thought. You know, he's not so mad about it anymore. He's not so like, grrr.
I think that was unintentional irony.
Could be.
Okay.
Or maybe finding out that now he can, you know, marry who he wants to marry. He's not so mad about it anymore. He's just kind of like, it's all good now.
Yeah, but
again, abrupt and could have been handled a little better, but
I think, you know, and there's other problems with the guild. I think they may have been a little too harsh to Jerry Church, completely, you could say, excommunicating him.
Pretty much.
And ostracizing him from the community. That just seems really harsh and terrible. So they're throwing, in a way, they throw away Jerry Church for the same reason that that Lincoln Powell complains that what would be our modern society. The same reason he complains that we were throwing people away is the reason they throw away Jerry Church. So because he went outside the bounds of society. So why couldn't Jerry Church have been rehabilitated? But Ben Riker can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, why can't Jerry Church be rehabilitated? I mean, they talk about how strong of character that Ben Reich is, and yet they are still able to demolish him. Jerry Church was a much weaker. I don't mean that he was weak and that he was weakly written. It's just that as a person, he just had.
Yeah, he had a weaker personality. He had maybe less potential for rehabilitation. He kind of just went wherever the wind blowed, whatever seemed most profitable to him.
Mm-hmm.
He was easily swayed.
Definitely.
Okay, so do you wanna end this thing?
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. I think we had a really good discussion, and I'm super happy that you recommended this book and you agreed to talk to me about it.
Well, of course.
And I think at least to us, it was interesting. Hopefully, it will be interesting to other people.
Yep. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching.
Yes.
And we hope. Yep, we hope that you enjoyed our conversation and our rambling, although we did manage to tie it all back together.
Hopefully.
Yep, and we both would highly recommend reading The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester.
Yes, it was fabulous, and I would love for anyone to recommend me, a book so I can have a discussion with them, or if they want to join some of our next discussions, you can check out on our website things we're going to be talking about pretty soon. And maybe Eric will come to join me for some of those other ones. I don't know.
I'd be happy to if I read the book.
If you have time to read the book.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.